On this episode of Edge of the Web.
Get there, you will hear a bunch of SEOs say like, oh yeah, but that doesn't work and it like causes problems. Yes, it causes problems if you're trying to be clever and saving bandwidth or making it easier for the crawler or whatever, and then you block JavaScript. If you block JavaScript, we can't run JavaScript. Will you prevent us from doing that? We don't get anything. Then we see an empty page, and if we see an empty page, we're like, this page is about nothing.
Your weekly digital marketing trends with industry trend-setting guests. You're listening and watching Edge of the Web. Winners of Best Podcast from the Content Marketing Institute for 2017. Here and see more at edgeofthewebradio.com. Now, here's your host, Aaron Sparks.
All right. Hey, this is Edge of the Web Radio, episode 359. I'm your host, Aaron Sparks. Every week we bring you some amazing guests to chat with regarding digital marketing trends and key concepts around digital marketing, such as SEO, such as search engine optimization and search engine marketing. Which is actually SEO, so I mentioned it twice, just for some optimization on a transcript. Social media, conversion rate optimization, website development, some deep technical things, as well as some key topical concepts of the omni-channel digital marketing broadcast in space. So if you haven't come across the show, thanks for listening. Thanks for jumping on and giving us a try. Each week, we unpack a lot of really great information for our listeners who may be in a digital marketing agency, maybe a freelancer, or marketing team, part of a company. This show is for you. So be sure to check out all the recent shows over at edgeofthewebradio.com. So if you're new to the show, the ropes are we usually are recording or going live on YouTube each and every Monday, but we're changing things up a little bit to be able to maybe even nuggetize things a little bit more for your use. So stay tuned as we change some of how we do on the show. But we actually will take the show, the video content, and move it right into audio, all the aggregation, podcast aggregation platforms such as iTunes, Google Play, Player FM, Spotify, Podbean, iHeartRadio, and the like. So if we're not where you are regularly listening to podcasts, let us know, and we'll certainly get our feed over to that platform. We'll take all the content, slice it into a number of different bite-sized portions of video content. We also have a bonus news podcast of the week that we work with our guest on deck to be able to go through and get some insights from them. So there's a lot of information we're sending out. We also transcribe and curate our content into multiple blog posts. So if you're looking for that transcription, if you're a transcribe junkie and want to be able to navigate that this transcription along with the audio podcast, we actually roll that out with timestamps so you can jump directly to different key concepts and topics that we covered on the show. So check it out over at edgeofthewebradio.com. The title sponsor of the show is Site Strategics, our parent company. We are a pioneer in the agile digital marketing methodology. Our core specialties are technical SEO, search engine marketing, as well as social media management and marketing, conversion optimization. We build websites on a regular basis, and much more. We also focus on the omni-channel broadcast methodology here. So omni-channel is really what we're doing right now with our studio. We actually do the video lane, social lane, audio lane, content search lane. So we try to curate as much as we can from a session like this with our clients. So if you're interested in what we can do for you, we can also do remote podcast development as well and do the exact same type of curation that we do for Edge. So give us a shout over at 877-SEO for Web, 877-736-4932 for those who don't want to translate the alphanumeric. Why do I even have that anymore? I mean, that's just almost like an insult, Jacob. Not giving you the phone number, I'm just going to make you figure out the puzzle real quick, right?
The only thing I think it's good for is for the podcast audience that's listening while they're driving. Maybe they can remember the words more than the numbers. And
877-SEO for Web.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and then get into the office and call us right away.
Right away.
Yeah, right away.
Just actually do it while you're driving, right? No.
Especially don't be converting letters to numbers while you're driving.
See, that's my point. Is if we're coming back out of shelter at home, people are going to be driving. We do this for the commute, and boy, it could. The only thing we could do worse is just ask them to scan a QR code on the app while they're driving.
There you go. Can we get it on a plane being pulled with like a banner
Around the
behind
city.
it and like lean out your window right now, take a picture of the QR code, touch the screen to make it focus.
Exactly. You do know that QR codes kill kittens, right?
I know.
There's a book that somebody wrote. I can't remember the author. I got to track it down and give him some props. It was an incredible book of how annoying and how completely out of left field QR codes were of no value whatsoever. That was written in like 2012 or something like that.
That's awesome.
And QR codes are still around.
Yeah.
Like bad pennies.
Yeah.
All right. That's Jacob in the booth. I hope you're doing well, sir.
I am, yeah. Right after this show today, I'm sprinting up to meet the family, and we're taking the kids tubing.
Oh.
All 4 kids at once. Haven't done that before, so it'll be an adventure.
It will be an adventure. Very cool. Very cool. All right. So we want to let you know who's coming up on future episodes here on The Edge. We have Marco Bonomo, who's going to be on air with us and our 629 show. And we're also going to have Mike Cool King, SEO extraordinaire on the 6th of July. So if you're interested in being part of the show, or if you're looking to pitch someone to our organization, just go over and email us at info@edgeofthewebradio.com. Be sure to set the reminders on YouTube as we go live. But like I said, we're changing up the format a little bit to give you some more consumable nuggets of information. So stay tuned, as that we're going to get some information over to you that you're going to enjoy even more so on the video and the audio side. So that's all the show housekeeping notes. Make sure you check out our bonus podcast of this episode covering the most recent digital marketing news with our guest today. So now let's meet this week's industry guest.
Now it's time for Edge of the Web featured interview with Martin Splitt, developer advocate at Google.
All right, how you doing, sir?
Hey, hi everyone. I'm doing pretty all right considering everything and all things. Doing well so far, I would say. Surviving.
Martin, it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak with you, and thanks for joining us. And we certainly appreciate what you're doing in the Google community, the SEO community, communicating on a regular basis. So it's fantastic to have you on the show. And on top of that, I love the do, man. You finally got out to actually to do the. I mean, you do it well, man. I could never pull it off, although I could try. Right. But
definitely try.
Fantastic. So Martin, let's introduce Martin Splitt to our audience. He is a developer advocate at Google. Martin's the developer advocate at honestly, it's Webmasters Trends team over at Google Switzerland. You're out of Zurich right now, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excellent. And
working from home.
Absolutely. Are you making the way in the office at all, or is it all at home right now?
All at home right now.
All right.
Waiting for the office to be reopened.
All right. So take it easy, and obviously there's no rush at all. So in your role, you help developers and content creators to build great content on the web. You're involved with the W3C organization, as well as a global and JavaScript developer community, and you keep the channels of communication open with your Webmasters Hangout, and that's what's the name of that Hangout again? That's JavaScript. No, I'm sorry.
JavaScript SEO office hours.
JavaScript SEO office hours, and you've been doing that for a good deal of time there, and we certainly appreciate that. And you, Gary, and John are all working hard in communication with the web world, sharing information regarding how Google actually looks at the web and their insights over at Google Webmasters Trends. So how is it working with Gary Allis and John Mueller?
Awesome. I'm always very, very happy and appreciative to have these two. It's a infinite treasure trove of knowledge in terms of search engine optimization in general, as well as Google specifics. I mean, Gary has been doing a lot of work around both crawling and indexing, as well as the robots exclusion protocol. He's now behind making this basically an official standard. The RFC is out there. John has been helping webmasters basically forever, has been the face of Google search for a long time. My JavaScript SEO office hours are obviously inspired by his webmaster office hours,
right?
That have been going on much longer. And he does them in German and English. I'm like, no, mine will only be English. deal with it. So it's awesome. It's really, really great to be part of this. It's fantastic to be part of the community. And yeah.
It is. It is fun, and it's great to be able to see your personality start to emerge from Google because, and we talked before the show that there has been a shift, a sizable shift from Google on sharing and communicating issues and concepts, and there was a period of time where it was pretty much a kind of an edifice that we really couldn't, as SEOs, get. I wouldn't say straight answers, but we read a lot into very controlled communication from Google, and now you're part of the team that's really forthcoming and a good deal more open and communicative. So thank you very much for that. But that's an interesting change from Google. So they're giving feedback. I mean, what does your job entail regularly, and not just communicating? You can't be on the mic all the time, right?
That is true. I'm not on the mic all the time. Communications is a lot larger than what people might see. The documentation is often kept in shape by us, or we write new documentation. We do show up at podcasts like this. Thank you very much for having me here.
Absolutely.
And it's an honor to be part of this as well. Producing content, the videos take quite a bit of work because we can't just start filming videos. We actually have to research what we're saying is accurate. This sounds like an obvious thing and an easy thing to do, but then again, Google is large. Google search alone has lots of teams working on things in parallel, so things can change quite quickly, and then we have to figure out what can we say without so you have to balance giving clarity to people where it's necessary and not giving too much detail where people then latch on to specific details that can change quite quickly, or where avoiding detail where there shouldn't be detail, just because it is an implementation detail and it can change. Even though I know that a bunch of people find even these details just very, very interesting, like how many redirects can we chain until Google bails. That's an implementation detail. It doesn't make sense for us to talk about that a lot because it can be, 10 today and 15 tomorrow, or maybe only 5 tomorrow. So that's what we're doing. We also do work with the individual teams in terms of figuring out the best strategy for them, how to implement things. So we do consult other teams or our consultants to other teams when they want to build new features, such as new product integrations, or if there's new structured data properties that need to be created for a specific use case. That's what we do. We do sometimes fix bugs. I know that Gary and I actually do quite a bit of actual code work as well. That's a lot of it is happening behind the scenes and is not necessarily visible.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like a good, well-balanced meal there, and it must be very satisfying, the role that you have.
It is. It is satisfying. It is just great to know that you can help lots of people, and the amount of people that you can reach through the work that you do is quite humbling. It comes with a lot of responsibility. We have to be very, very careful not to just break things for a lot of people, which means sometimes we move slower than people would like us to move. But yeah, it's humbling. It is interesting. It is exciting. It makes me happy to see how people can build sustainable and successful things on the web.
Very good.
With the information we give.
Well, we're certainly going to get into a number of key topics, and I wanted to just let our audience know we are going to do some deep diving, but on top of it, just going through some common mistakes that people do still that we want to have some help from you to clarify. But before anything else, give us your history. Give us how you came to be in that role.
So I have been a web developer for many, many years, and actually a software engineer in various fields, including web development. And the most interesting part for me has not necessarily been the day-to-day coding work. That was interesting as long as it meant researching solutions to sometimes quite tricky problems, or finding better ways for not so tricky problems and doing them differently. But the education part has always been really, really interesting. I loved always loved to help other people up to speed, and also to like learn from them and take what they have built and build something new from it. So the education part has been a large part of what I enjoy in this. Like you do creative problem solving with computers, and then you teach others on how to do the same, and then they take it further and build things that you were not even able to imagine when you did what you did with the technology. And so I became like a public speaker. I became a Google Developer Expert, which is a community of people who are sharing their knowledge with the larger community for free, and organize things such as meetups or conferences. I've been doing that for quite a while, and then eventually someone reached out to me, and I'm not sure if it was a recruiter or if it was someone else from Google, like, hey, we have this role open in Zurich. Would you be interested? And it was this specific role. And I'm like, so not only would I be able to continue solving problems with technology and code, but it would be an integral part of my job to share the knowledge with others and to empower others to build stuff that is discoverable on the web. And I mean, it's a product that I use. Google Search is something that I have been using multiple times each day in my life beforehand. And so it's something where you're like, yeah, knowing how to make sure that the startup that has just started their operations, as well as the big brand that is global, gets the information to the people who look for the information, that is really, really interesting. And when I was interviewing, I remember very well, there was a bit of a conversation between me and the recruiter in question that was dealing with the entire recruiting process for me. If this role is more web focused or more search focused, and there wasn't a clear answer, and so I decided, I'm in Zurich, the team is in Zurich, I'm applying for a role in Zurich. Why not just ask my potential future manager if he would be interested in having lunch? So I met John for lunch. And this is probably very likely going to sound ridiculous, but I wasn't aware who John is. I wasn't really following the SEO like scene and news cycle.
Right.
SEO for me was something that happened when you do things right for your users. And that includes like having good content, having a useful content strategy, information architecture, and then a solid technical foundation. Then normally SEO just happens. It is handy to have an SEO who knows their stuff. And I enjoyed working with SEOs, with the good SEOs beforehand, just as much as I enjoyed working with good developers beforehand. But it wasn't something that I was like actively following or being aware of. So there was this lovely, friendly gentleman and this slightly less talkative, but also somewhat friendly, if not very sarcastic gentleman. And then another very sarcastic person, Maria, who has since moved to become the product manager for SiteKit, which is a WordPress plugin. But she used to be on our team as well. And I was there having lunch with them, and we had a fantastic conversation. It was great. And then I noticed that I haven't actually gotten an answer to my question. And when I got through the entire interview process, and basically they gave me some offer to sign, I had another lunch with them. And then I asked very frankly, and I remember that conversation very vividly. I was like, okay, now what is it that you are all doing? And I got the answer like, it depends. Every day is different. It's not very easy to say how these things, like how a normal day looks like. Now I can definitely sign that. Like every day is different, I feel. And then I'm like, okay, yes, but you all are experienced in both Google Search internals as well as also doing SEO. I have done SEO beforehand when I worked in agencies and smaller companies and larger companies, but I've only done the content bit as well as the technical bit. There's much more to that than just these two. So why do you hire me? Why do you want me to be part of this team? And they said, look, you have been building websites and web applications, and you have like contributed to web standards as well as JavaScript frameworks. I think you are the right person to talk to web developers about this, because web developers do not know about this. And I'm like, yes, that is true. And I think, yeah, that makes sense to figure out what's the developer angle on this. How do developers think about this?
Right.
Where do we struggle and how do we overcome the struggle? And what is the exact struggle that we're dealing with when it comes to modern JavaScript and SEO? That was an interesting challenge to me. And yeah, now I'm here.
And it is and that's a great story. Thank you. I can imagine that's but part of the regular mantra is it depends, right? I mean, there's a lot,
Yes.
a lot behind
Yeah.
those two words, but what they brought to bear and what your role is recognizing the chasm between SEOs and developers. And it's a shame because when SEO really started to evolve, it came out of the developer annals. I mean, I'm an old SEO, way old, and I come from the development background. I was developing websites 30 years ago, and it just made sense. And you had to have that technical knowledge to be able to start affecting change. So it originated from the developer community, but at some point in time, in the .com era, SEOs could actually jump in from a content and a marketing standpoint without a good background in development at all. And this is when CMSs started to gear in. All of a sudden, you could actually start pushing a lot of content, and the respect for the back end, the foundational technical consistency and best code standards really kind of got left to the wayside. So you didn't have that analytical, scientific mindset, programmatic mindset. You had a marketing mindset that could actually affect some technical, and the entire world changed. So there's not saying that the SEOs nowadays are without any type of development background. That's not the case. In fact, some of the best SEOs, Glenn Gabe and Lily Ray, they're in that space, and they have a deep knowledge into technical. But there has been this soft, creamy middle. I'm describing SEO like a Twinkie. that really don't have that foundational knowledge. Would you agree with that, Martin?
I think that's generally true. Yeah. So, and as you said, I don't even want to make a value statement out of it. It's just a matter of things have gotten more broad and more complicated and more interlinked with other disciplines and things. And we see that on the developer side as well. There used to be this lovely role. We're actually still thinking about how to change our name to reflect the change in the reality as well, because there used to be the role of a webmaster, right?
Right.
I've been a webmaster at the very beginning of my career at some point for some smaller websites. And it's like, yeah, sure, you get some content. You put that into HTML if your author doesn't do that, or if they do, then usually you clean it up so that it's actually reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And then you upload that to an FTP server, and then you're measuring that content actually shows up and making sure that your web server keeps running smoothly and quickly and that there's nothing going wrong. That doesn't exist anymore. Now we have ops teams who are operating the websites, and then you have a front-end developer, and you have a back-end developer, and you have a content editor, and maybe you have a content marketing person, and then you have someone who does SEO, and then you have someone who deals with the entire web marketing side of things, as in ads and search engine marketing. So the jobs have been, or the roles have been first broadened, and then they split into separate different roles that coexist and coexist peacefully.
Right.
And I think that sometimes makes things easier, because you can say, oh, no, I only do technical SEO. I don't do any of the other aspects of it.
Right.
Or, oh, no, I only do local SEO, or whatever. You can specialize yourself. But then again, on the other hand, it also limits the usefulness of the overarching role of SEO, right? What is SEO today? And then you get people asking you, so what is more important? Is it content? Is it technical SEO, or is it design or link building? And I'm like, well, what is more important in a car, the steering wheel or the motor? Or
Yeah. It's a whole. You got to have the appreciation of the holistic view, but you also have to have lateral skill enhancements. You can't. You got to be that T person, not that I person, because if you don't know how your content affects SEO and vice versa, if you don't know how your JavaScript can be utilized to be able to execute even better SEO, or if your JavaScript's actually breaking something or blocking something, you don't have that cross-pollination, you just don't understand, right?
Yeah, then you're just seeing something not working and you don't know why it's not working.
Right.
And if you don't know why it's not working, how are you fixing it?
Yep. Nope. I would concur completely. So that's the mission. That's the mission of the Webmasters Trends team, right?
That is the mission that we help other people succeed with building things on the web and succeed specifically in the sense of being successful in organic search.
Very good.
That's what we are dealing with.
Very good. All right. So I wanted to bring out a quick video of you at a recent conference. You were talking about Angular. I just wanted to tee up to our audience this audio and video piece. Go ahead, Jacob.
But before we go into the technology thing of SEO, the technology aspect of SEO, I'd like to quickly say one thing. Without good content and good strategy of how you put that content in the hands of users, your SEO efforts on the technical side are basically chocolate ice cream smiley. Because it's polishing a turd. That's what it comes down to. If your content isn't good, no technical implementation fixes will fix that.
I wanted to grab that nugget and throw it at our audience because that's your space right there. The content marketers have to understand, or the content team has to understand they have to have good quality content, and the developers cannot stay in the space thinking that if the technical side of things are clean and pure, that SEO is just going to come magically like a field of dreams. You've got to have both groups interacting and supporting each other, right?
Yeah. Absolutely, and as you say, there can't be one without the other. Obviously, this was directed at developers who tend to laser focus on the technology side of things. Mm-hmm. If I were to give this exact talk to a content audio or content facing audience or digital marketing audience, I would probably say they might underestimate the technology side. So I'll say, like, it doesn't matter how great the content is that you create. If Google can't see it, if crawlers or bots can't see it, then what is it good for, right?
Absolutely.
So it is definitely like the mix of both things. You can't have one without the other.
Very good, very good. And that's part of our mission today, is to be able to make sure people hear that. I'm going to take a quick rip off of Barry's interview with Search Engine Journal that he did with you in May, because he actually did some really cool things just to break down some key simplifying things down for maybe some of our audience that doesn't understand. Just drilling down into what is crawling briefly. Can you describe that in a couple sentences? And I know that's a really tough thing to do, but you get it.
I mean, crawling is reasonably easy to explain. Crawling is the equivalent of making a phone call to someone to give you information that they know and you don't. That's what crawling is. So when we basically, if I were to make you a crawler, your job would be, I give you a piece of paper with a URL, and then you have to go to that URL. You have to call that number, so to speak, and figure out what is the information behind that number, behind that URL. So I give you a web address, example.com. What a crawler does is it makes a network request to the server that is at that address, and then gets whatever comes back as a response. Normally, if that's a website, then that would be HTML.
Right. Okay. So you use the euphemism of as a librarian of sorts, being able to actually go through and understand it a little bit and be able to browse through books. But so you've got the crawling, but now let's talk about indexing and how does indexing work? Because this is where people really need to understand. This is where SEO starts, right? Yeah.
And to go to the librarian metaphor that I heard the first time from Miriam Yessier, it stuck with me because that is such a beautifully simple metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
The crawler, again, is the one that grabs a book from, or gets orders a book from a bookstore and puts it in the library. That's the first step.
Right.
But then just buying a bunch of books blindly from like, I don't know, bestseller lists or whatever, doesn't mean that you know what kind of information you have in front of you. So the next step is the indexing step, where we take what the crawler has given us. So in the library metaphor, that's the book that I have in front of me that I just bought. In the metaphor of actually technology, we have the HTML lying around. Now we need to understand, what is this about? So we open the book and we read through the book and we basically try to figure out, what is this book about? And that is more nuanced than you would think. I mean, if it's like cooking for cats, great. Then I can tell it's about cooking and it's about cats. But what exactly is in the book? Is that literally recipes for very fancy cat food? Is this recipes for cats with medical conditions? Is this not recipes? Does this happen to just be like a book full of pictures with cats in the kitchen? Who knows? Or is it like a comic book about cats that run a restaurant or something like that? So the indexing stage tries to understand, what is this about and what information does this provide?
And if I could interject, that's where Bert also came in, because that for combination, right?
Yeah.
That if you replace it with a with could be a whole different perspective.
Yeah.
So part of that is also understanding the intent of the title. Not to get completely morbid and grim there. So we'll change back over to your algorithm. So it's semantics, right?
It is semantics. It is semantics. This is also why HTML, like having more or less proper standard compliant HTML, does help a little bit, because then you give us additional semantics. It doesn't matter as much if you only have one H1 tag or if you have 5. That's not super important. What is important is that you have headlines and that they are structured in a way that makes sense. So don't have like an H2 tag as your main page title and then have a section as an H1. That makes no sense. And yeah, so now we are trying to understand, what kind of information do we have, what kind of information is in a specific document, and then store that away so that we can later retrieve it. And that's, again, in the library. If you are interested in recipes for cats with certain allergies, you don't want to have to read every book that has the word cat or recipe or cooking in the title. You want then probably 3 or 4 books that are actually dealing with the topic that you are interested in.
Right.
And a good librarian is then probably using an index to look up, like, okay, so we have these books on cats. From this list, only these are cats and recipes, and only these are like specific to allergic cats or something like that.
And that's where the knowledge panel comes in, some of the display on Google, because it's understanding the entities that are being defined by these quality reference points.
Yeah.
And Bill Slawski is certainly tracking on a good Google patents on a regular basis, and he has given a good deal of perspective of how Google is actually trying to build these clusters of information and understand the relationships between these different books, right? And how it all goes to create a much better picture of that entity or those related entities as well. So that's what Google's doing on a regular basis, is trying to find the best books for you.
Yeah.
All right. So
exactly.
We're done, right?
Yeah, pretty much. If only it would be so easy.
If it would be so easy. All right, so that shifts into your key pursuit. And what happens is that your book could literally get unread if your code is blocking or causing problems for the bot to actually go through, the Google crawler to go through and be able to not only digest the content, but also index that content. The indexing happens, obviously, away from the scenes, but the crawler's coming through, and if there are issues with the site, when it comes down to code, when it comes down to loading time of the site, the speed of the site, all these things play into how Google can read that book. So What are some of the common issues regarding, and I just want to tee up for you, well, first and foremost, let's talk about JavaScript for a moment and understand how JavaScript plays a part in this. We have HTML, which is the structure of a document. You've got CSS, which is affecting the appearance of the document. Then you've got JavaScript, which allows for the dynamic areas of the document and the actions of the document itself. All right, so all that has to be HTML, CSS have to be loaded up, but JavaScript can actually play a very beneficial role or a counteracting role. So what are the? It's a very important area that JavaScript plays in this. So give us an idea of what are some common mistakes and some common opportunities that JavaScript can help in enhancing SEO.
So a bunch of stuff is related to JavaScript and a bunch of the common mistakes. So first things first, I'm always mind blown how creative people are in building things that break, and they break in many different ways. There are a few hotspots where like multiple people make the same mistake, or where like an underlying piece of technology that is used by a lot of sites makes a mistake and then breaks a bunch of them. But so far, most of the time, people have very specific, very unique problems. And it is quite interesting to see that pretty much like I usually encounter, like, let's say like I encounter 10 people with problems and it's 11 different problems. The more common ones are that people try to be clever and then that cleverness backfires for them. Very specific examples, there are a few people who are like, ooh, I'm worried about crawl budget, where that never has been a problem, or even if it has been a problem. And then they're like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll prevent the crawler from fetching JavaScript from this site, or making requests to this API that we are using, which is a great idea unless all the content that we see comes from that API and is rendered by JavaScript.
Right.
Because if your HTML is pretty much empty and then JavaScript runs in the renderer as part of the Googlebot's infrastructure and then fetches the data and then gets the data into the HTML, that's not a problem. There's nothing wrong with it. But yet you will hear a bunch of SEOs say like, oh yeah, but that doesn't work and it like causes problems. Yes, it causes problems if you're trying to be clever and saving bandwidth or making it easier for the crawler or whatever, and then you block JavaScript. If you block JavaScript, we can't run JavaScript. We can't run something that we can't request. We need to download the JavaScript and run it, and then that JavaScript fetches the content. If you prevent us from doing that, we don't get anything. Then we see an empty page, and if we see an empty page, we're like, this page is about nothing. So we don't need to keep it around because it's kind of useless. That's one thing that happens.
Kind of like the sleeve of a book, right?
Yeah, exactly. You just give us an empty sleeve, and then we're like, okay, this is useless. And then
I'm just going to run with that analogy until we can. We're just going to milk this thing all the way down. All right. So
excellent.
So that's some of the problems right there. What other examples would you have of these mistakes? I know you can't bring a huge amount, but some commonality of things just to.
And another thing is often that people use, and that's especially when there are no SEOs involved and it's developers pretty much doing things by themselves. They get so hung up on all the cool technology bits and pieces that they forget the basics, and then you may end up with pages that have the same title on every page and have the same meta description for everything, and might even, like, I don't know, have other things that look terrifyingly bad, or don't use normal links. They use something fancy instead of an actual link, and then we are not seeing the link to the other things. And then it's like, yeah, okay, how are we supposed to discover these pages if you're not linking to them?
Right. You mentioned that before, like on-click events and buttons and things like that.
And don't get me wrong, on-click events per se on a button, on an actual link are not a problem. It's just have an actual link with an actual URL, and this has been documented multiple times, and we keep seeing this.
Got it.
That's one thing that we see quite often. Another lovely thing is to have critical content hidden behind user interactions. And when I say hidden behind user interactions, I don't mean that the content is there, just not visible. It's just not there until the user interacts with the page.
Some sort of Ajax call or something like that.
And even that is fine, but like you have to click a read more button that actually loads the second half of an article. And then they're like, we're not showing up for all these bits and pieces. And I'm like, yeah, because all these bits and pieces aren't there, because they are only being loaded. They're not there and hidden. No, they're not there until you click the button. Then it gets moved by an Ajax call into the actual document. That's the equivalent of not shipping a book, but basically your book is just a piece of paper that says, send me $5 and I'll send you the rest. The library won't do that. The library opens the book, goes like, okay, so this is nothing, and then into the trash it goes.
For clarity, and we want to stop there, is just reflecting back on the crawler. The crawler is not a human interaction. The crawler will only interact with what's loaded, ready for navigable interaction from one page to another page. It can't emulate. We'd love it for it to do. It can't emulate a mouse movement to click on something or any type of. Yeah, go ahead.
It won't move the mouse. It won't click on your buttons. It won't scroll. It doesn't interact with the page at all. It looks at the HTML that we have, and this HTML can come from JavaScript, but it has to be happening without a user interaction.
All right, so there are some of the horror stories or some of the issues and for listeners, they may want to pivot around to their own content and have a little bit of scrutiny on it. They may be some fancy widgets on the page, but is the crawler actually able to interact with these things? Make sure you have links on the page. Make sure you're not revealing things with a customer interaction. It looks great on the browser, but you could be irreparably harming your visibility of your content there. All right. So conversely, there are some really cool things that you can do with JavaScript. We'll get to your podcast in a minute, but you were just talking about rendering structured data inside of JavaScript as well, right?
Yeah. That can be a way. I mean, I would go for robustness first, and if you can put it in the HTML straight away, that's fantastic. But a bunch of people can't or don't want to for whatever reason. There has been situations where people had Google Tag Manager on the pages that they created, but they don't really have access to the page code itself. And when they ask, like, can we have a JSON LD block here for this recipe or for this product, and then the project leader or the project manager says no, because we don't have any developer that has availability to implement this, then you could use Google Tag Manager to do that. What you shouldn't be doing is you shouldn't be copy and pasting information from the page into Google Tag Manager, but you can write a little bit of JavaScript that takes the information out of the page and puts it into a structured data JSON block. So for instance, if you know that the H3 element on the page is always the name of the product, and then below it in a very specific place, there is the product image, and then in a very specific place, there's the product price, then you can write JavaScript that runs in Google Tag Manager and picks these bits and pieces from the page and puts them into structured data, and then puts the structured data on the page. That way, your structured data and page content stay in sync with each other, as well as you actually implement structured data without needing that much of developer attention. And the code you have to write is very, very simple. So
now, it's beautiful. In fact, you beat me to the punch. I was going to ask you about that. We just talked to Paul Lovell a show or two ago regarding implementation of JSON LD on Tag Manager, and I was going to ask you what your vote was there, but you already beat me to it. So that's fantastic. But there lies the complexity is that you can reload up dynamic JSON LD schema as long as you have consistent titling and identity tags inside the content itself, right?
Yes.
If things get squirrely, then you've got empty holes in your schema.
Exactly. And then you're confused why it doesn't work. And then you have debugging at your hands, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So for the rest of the audience that didn't know what we just said there, well, we'll certainly unpack it in the show notes. I wanted to pivot around to the relationship to of SEOs and developers. And briefly, what should an SEO? How should an SEO listen to a developer? And what should be their obligation or their role there?
I think the listening isn't the biggest problem. I think it makes sense to know or to be aware of how the development team works, in the sense of when can I expect changes to be testable? What's the earliest convenient point in time where I can test? This can be once a week, or maybe in the afternoon of each day, or maybe every second day of the week, or once a month. It doesn't matter. But like basically understand that the sooner you can test something, the better it is, because the sooner you can give actionable feedback. If something is about to be deployed, let's say like 10 developers have worked to make 100 little changes, and they are basically, after 2 weeks, they are ready to put this in production, and everyone waits for it, and maybe a sales representative has promised one of these changes to the customers to be available next week. And then you say last minute, oh, there's this one change that breaks everything. It might be very, very hard to extract that breaking change from the rest of the changes. And then this might have knock-on effects that are very, very unpleasant for everyone involved, basically. The earlier you can test, the better it is. Help them understand how they can test as well while they're developing, because we do have tools such as the mobile-friendly test, the rich results test,
Right.
Where they can test their local development setup as well. They don't have to deploy this live and then watch what happens the week after. And also very important is, how do you feed information back to them? Because that depends definitely on the team that you're working with. Some might say, oh, can I like come to you and grab you for a minute or two, or like a 10-minute session? Can we have a 10-minute session tomorrow, just so that I can test with you to prevent surprises? I think that's a good case. That's a very, very good scenario.
Right.
And you shouldn't be like, oh, I'm too busy for this, because then they're going to do it anyway. It's not that they are like, oh, in that case, we never will ever fix any bugs or implement any features ever again. We'll just like stop touching the website and ignore the screaming we get from the business owner and from the product owner. Work with them. Don't try to work against them, but also don't just like yell at them in random intervals. Like, oh my God, I found this thing and it's broken and it's the worst thing ever and it's a huge showstopper, because that's not their decision to make. And your word is as good as anyone's word that this is a showstopper. Talk to, if they have a product owner, talk to the product owner, say like, hey, I noticed there's this problem. Can we like figure out how to fix this? Be okay if they say, look, we can't fix it right now. We have bigger fish to fry. That's a conversation that has nothing to do with the development team. Usually that's more with the product owner probably, but have these conversations, figure out what's the best way to feed back information. If they say open a ticket for us and put in this piece of information and that piece of information, then just do that. And sometimes it's as easy as just showing them or posting a link to the mobile friendly test and say like, if I put this URL into the mobile friendly test in the rendered HTML, I expect to see this, but I don't.
Spell it out. Right.
And then they can figure out the rest normally.
Absolutely. Getting their buy-in and yeah, you're absolutely right. Utilize the tool sets that are in not only for testing, but also any type of tool sets that developers use in an organization to manage different requests. Yeah, you gotta jump into that lane and use and be part of their processes internally. At the same time, getting their buy-in and sharing with them the successes, not just the failures, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And showing what they contributed to be able to move this rank up to this, or this particular user experience caused this many new leads or pieces of business or product purchases. Having that type of buy-in. I mean, developers sometimes get pushed to the corner even if there is a sizable department, they are pushed away from sales, away from marketing, and there are some points of resentment sometimes whenever everybody comes to the campfire. Everybody's got some blame to throw around, and they're not really sharing in the wins regularly. I'd highly recommend for organizations to be able to have that bonding moment of a win, that buy-in factor, so devs can actually see their valued contribution as opposed to just order takers.
And just generally transparency. It's
Absolutely.
also the sharing the wins is a fantastic point. That's very good that you bring that up, because yes, definitely share the wins, but also try to be as transparent as possible, in the sense of, if you know that they are about to do something that isn't fantastic, tell them the moment you find out through the channels that are meant to be used for telling them these kind of things. Don't come to them 6 months after the release and say, like, you have ruined everything. That's not helping. Definitely.
Right.
And also be aware that your voice has a long-term impact, in the sense of, if every little small detail that you find that is off, if you are crying, oh my God, showstopper, our business is going to fail,
Right.
You might get away with this once or twice, and then afterwards they're like, so we have ignored your crying for the last 2 weeks and we are still fine. So okay. And I've seen that. Like, I have personally experienced people running to me, basically asking me to interrupt whatever I was doing because there's duplicate content on the website, and without a canonical tag, everything will basically go up in flames immediately, and Google will penalize us and remove us from the search results, and everything is going to be terrible. And I'm like, I don't think so. Can you prove what you're saying? There was no proof. There was only yelling. And then I'm like, okay, that's like your opinion.
Yeah, there's a lot, and that's the thing, is that a lot of the content marketers / SEOs are going to cry wolf an awful lot, right? And without factual data, and that's where the other side of the fence needs. What's the responsibility of the developers from an education standpoint? Because, like we talked about, that creamy feeling of pseudo SEOs or content marketers, I think they're SEOs, and they got to understand some of the ramifications that they're asking for. But don't the developers have a role to be able to give some of the framework in which SEOs need to understand? And a lot of times developers won't know SEO tactics, but that's much more in lane technically than a content marketer. So what's the obligation for, or what's the value for a developer actually having regular communication back into the marketing department?
I think it's kind of cool if developers get to help SEOs in the digital marketing department to understand what they're doing and what are the upsides of the things that they are doing. And that can be all sorts of things, because the way that developers build things can also empower the marketing team to have a little more influence themselves and be more autonomous, right?
Yeah.
If it's a closed platform and you only have a way to basically give your input and hand it over to someone else, and then this other person has to actually make the thing happen, that might not be great for marketers either, especially if you want to quickly experiment. But if a developer builds you a way to participate in the creation process and maybe test things out and maybe deploy things directly yourself, then that gives you a lot more autonomy. And you only get that autonomy if you can articulate what you need to developers and have them listen to it as well.
So it's really educating and giving a common vernacular established within the organization or between the different departments, so they can speak each other's language, right?
Yeah, and I think it only works really when you are actually talking to each other in the same language, because if not, then you'll end up in misunderstandings, and then there will be situations where a developer says something that is obvious to them but that causes confusion on the receiving end. And if you are too proud to ask questions, the same for developers. Oftentimes developers just go with like, yeah, I heard that SEOs say that this and that, and I don't exactly know what that means, but I think that it is good. And I'm like, yeah, but why don't you just ask? If you don't know what structured data is, ask. Right? The SEO in question who wants the structured data to be added to the page probably is happy to explain to you what it is and what they hope to gain from it, as well as developers is like, we're changing to React. And then developers, SEOs come to me and say like, so our developers want to go to React. I don't even know what that is. I'm like, why don't you ask?
Yep.
Why don't you just ask?
Yeah, we have too many camps that we stay in, and there's not enough foreign exchange students between the two camps. So you have your work cut out for you, Martin, in communicating this regularly. Briefly, we just want to let our listeners know that all this information is deliverable in your inbox on a regular basis. So if you want to sign up for the Edge newsletter, text to the number 22828, the word Edge Talk, not when you're driving, and you can sign up right there, or go over to Edge of the Web Radio and sign up there at the top. We'll send this content to you of who we talked to, some of the key concepts we covered, as well as the news items. All right. So final topic, finishing up, and I really appreciate your time, Martin. I think this was a good amount of content to get in front of people, understanding what Google Web Trends team is doing, and what their mission is, and what your personal mission is. And I think they picked the right person to be able to try to bring these warring factions together. But I want to cover something real quick. There's been some great changes on Google Search Console as well. Have you been participant in some of those efforts?
I haven't been involved in much of the recent changes in Search Console. No.
Nope. All right, but you still like them, right?
Of course, yeah. The team is fantastic, and we do talk to each other, and we do hang out. Yeah,
they are doing a great job. The kind of last points on my agenda were some of the revisiting the Webmasters Hangouts, JavaScript SEO office hours is what you're doing regularly. How often are you actually doing that?
Right now, the JavaScript SEO office hours are weekly. As long as I'm in home office, this is probably going to stay that way.
Sure.
But I might change to a less frequent schedule if I see question frequency is going down. But so far, we always have enough questions.
Yeah. You're getting some good listens there. Have you come across any Easter eggs of communication while you've been doing that? Some lessons learned of how people are perceiving what you're saying, or have guided you into even some other additional topics to cover?
So what I really enjoy about these is that the questions do shine a light on where our documentation isn't exactly great, as well as where documentation is just not well known enough.
Good.
So I've seen both cases where I got a question and I was like, I could just point to this piece of documentation, and I noticed, no, I can't, because it doesn't cover what has been asked here, or I see where this confusion comes from looking at the documentation.
Got it.
But as much we have the case where the documentation is there, it's just not, people are not aware of it.
Kind of crowdsourcing to a bit, finding out where the holes are or some clarity needs. Cool. All right. Last thing. I just listened to a fantastic podcast last night. You just launched Search Off the Record with you, Gary, and John. Out of the gate, you've got a great show. You're recording remote. Everything sounds great, and it's very well produced. Who made the decision on this, and how often are you going to be making these?
So the podcast was the brainchild of our video producer. Sounds funny, but that's like she came up with this when we did the content planning for 2020. She's like, how about maybe having like a podcast on top of all the other things that we have? And we said, yeah, that sounds interesting. What would the podcast be like? And then we came up with the idea of sharing. So like, a lot of the stuff that we do, as I said, doesn't happen in public. It happens in the office, so to speak, now. And it is interesting. It is either we are just having fun together. We are laughing a lot together as a team. And so that's one thing. The other thing is that we do discuss interesting bits and pieces that don't fit any of the other outlets. We can't put that in documentation because it isn't finalized yet. We can't put it in the blog because there's nothing to announce yet. We can't put it into the educational videos because we don't know the details of the thing that is going to come because it hasn't taken shape yet. So we usually so far just didn't bring it up because there was no, like, it was coming up in the office conversations that we had with each other over a coffee or over tea or over lunch or over whatever.
Right.
But it didn't make the light of day. And sometimes that is a little sad because the topics were interesting. So we decided, why don't we just take our random coffee chats into the podcast, and then basically we're not pre-announcing anything. We're just saying what we're working on.
Right.
And we might need to have the disclaimer that things that we're talking about might not see the light of day when that is the case. I think Gary did that when he talked about the no index changes. The no follow changes.
Right.
But I think it's interesting to share these things, and it gives you a feeling for what's happening, even if it looks like there's nothing happening because all the other formats aren't there yet. And you can oftentimes see that. Like I could have in December started talking about the fact that we are about to launch the Evergreen Googlebot, but there was nothing to actually put out there in any of the formats.
Right.
When people were catching me at a conference and we had a conversation, I might have been bringing it up, but I couldn't even say it on stage because then that gets produced as a video or as a blog post where it says Martin announces.
Mm-hmm.
Now this month they started rolling it out, which is not true. We didn't roll it out. It's just we started testing it more broadly.
It gives you the informal space that
it gives me the informal space, or us the informal space to discuss things, and also sometimes questions that we have for each other are actually also questions that people are having for us.
Yep.
So that's kind of nice. That has a nice swing to it, and
absolutely, it was very informative. And you guys covered the release of the core Web Vitals, and you can certainly listen to that podcast. We won't cover that, although I had it in my show notes. We're out of time here, but I do want to share this audio clip because it was just fantastic.
Of course, JavaScript is the biggest culprit here, but you can also screw it up with HTML. So for instance, if you have super huge images, that if you are a photographer, you probably want to upload the highest possible quality, and then you just put these images in and you just make them look small in the browser, but the browser has to actually download the full, 20 megapixel image, which is like multiple floppy disks in size. Then your website would probably be like...
Why would I want to download floppy disks?
Well,
who downloads floppy disks, Martin?
You would
How old are you?
You wouldn't download a car. I actually would. No, I think floppy disk is just such an archaic medium at this point, and it's such a reasonable size. And when I see people are throwing 10 megabyte images on me, and then I'm like, that's like 7 floppy disks. What are you doing? Because I remember the times where you would install a game and going insert floppy disk 12 out of 15. So yeah, I'm old, but still young at heart.
All right, so I had to bring that up, and forgive me for bringing it. You spoke to me there.
That's fine.
You spoke to me there because
me too. Absolutely. I still, if I I remember looking at was it Adobe
Adobe Photoshop? Yeah,
shows you how big it is. How big the page is or whatever. I remember looking at that and my brain would always just convert that to floppy disks. I've done that forever.
Yeah, that's the reasonable thing to do. And I mean, the next biggest, what medium would I reference? Like a DVD? But luckily, please, developers, don't take this as an invitation to make websites the size of a DVD or the capacity of a DVD.
I thought that was a wonderful increment, and that connected because literally I remember doing the installs on a regular basis. Oh my God, I got 12 more to go through.
Exactly.
Just to get Photoshop loaded up on the machine. So I appreciate the reference.
And I had entire games ran off a single or maybe 2 floppy disks, and they were amazing, and they captured our attention for hours on end. And now the header image of some websites for a restaurant around the corner or something is larger than that, and I'm like, how did we end up here?
because of high-speed bandwidth, right? And we were just spoiled rotten. So optimize your images. Don't load up floppy disks on your website unless you're wanting to deliver a car to Martin. All right. So, hey, I really appreciate your time, and you have been very gracious, giving us almost a couple hours here. Just want to reference real quick, what bugs you about your industry right now?
I think there is a bit of I don't know, like there's I love discussions, and I love discussions that are leading to something, but some of it is just like drama and kind of pointless, and I think that's annoying because it just keeps us from solving the actual more interesting problems or the important problems. That's one thing. That is annoying to have to deal with like random drama every now and then, or overreactions to things that we put out or others put out. That's a little annoying.
I can only imagine it's a pain in the role that you, John and Gary, have. There's continual flames and hyper reactions. Everybody needs to calm down, and we've heard this on the show multiple times from other SEOs. Everybody needs to calm down. Everybody is contributing, but at the same time, just don't overreact. Have some patience, and don't read into things so much. Well, conversely, what excites you about the industry so far?
I think it's super cool that we are so broad that there's like always a new discovery from an area where you not necessarily expect it, and you read all sorts of articles, and there's so much diversity in the sense of backgrounds as well as where people are paying attention, or where people are like investing time in. Be it people using Python to build really interesting data science extraction tools, or be it people using machine learning to figure out how to create better content for humans. I think all of that is really, really exciting.
Very good. Very good. Well, we certainly want to promote for you your information link, goo.gle/js-seo-basics. Tell us about that real quick.
Yes. So that's the JavaScript SEO beginner's guide, basically with all the basics that you should know, developer or not, about if you use JavaScript and what implications that has for Google search.
Very good. Very good. All right. So for all of our listeners, we want to make sure they track Martin down. His Twitter handle is G33KO0. On LinkedIn, he's Martin Splitt. And Facebook account, you find him on Martin Splitt as well. Any final thoughts regarding JavaScript? I'll give you the picture here. You choose one of three: JavaScript and SEO, jump into conclusions, or pink fluffy unicorns. Go.
Pink fluffy unicorns.
Final thoughts on that?
They're awesome. They're fluffy. How great is that? How can you not like pink fluffy unicorns?
Absolutely. You know, you're just not human if you don't.
True.
All right, Mark. Hey, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're more than welcome. More than welcome. And we certainly will be championing you as you talk to the masses and let them know that we all need to play nice with each other, SEOs and devs, respectively. So thanks, and keep up the good work. We'll certainly lift you up from afar. All right.
Likewise. Take care. Have a great time.
We will. We will. And put a bug in John's ear. We want to get him back on the show in the next couple of months, too. Okey-doke. Hey, please do not forget to like and subscribe to Edge of the Web Radio on YouTube. And if you're really feeling up to it today, drop us a quick review on iTunes. We want to hear what you think of what we're doing on the show. And certainly their feedback is welcome, as we want to listen to our listeners and keep on providing the content that you're looking for. Check out all the must-see videos and content over at edgeofthewebradio.com, transcripts of the show, as well as some articles, all the news briefs that we covered in content there. And hey, just let us know how we're doing over there as well. We have an anonymous poll still going on. Let us know how or what you'd like to hear from us next. Next week, we're going to be talking to Marco Bonomo. And for all of us over at Edge, stay safe, stay well. Wherever you can, enjoy the summer, but also do it with care. From all of us over at Edge and Site, be good and do not be a piece of cyber driftwood. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.